Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, today the Munich Security Conference has kicked off. I guess our invitation got lost in the mail. It happens like that. And first out of the gate was Friedrich Merz, as you would expect, since it's in Munich and in Germany. So he's the German Chancellor.
Well,
So
it's being on a dour note. Go
yeah,
ahead.
exactly. And now coming into this security conference, there's been naturally a lot of anguish. Now, since time immemorial, ever since I can remember, the Europeans have always been anguishing about the United States. They're always concerned that the Americans are losing interest in them, that Americans are not preoccupied with their problems. And so, they're very much like, teenagers who, on the one hand, they want to proclaim their independence, and on the other hand, they're worried that their parents are losing interest in them.
Yeah,
So
the next iPhone won't come delivered under the Christmas tree. Yeah.
that's right. So that's it's been the Europeans, so from 60s and the Reagan era, they're always complaining. So coming into this conference, they all the European leaders have been complaining that somehow the United States is seeking to detach itself from Europe. The United States is not really doing enough to whatever keep the rules-based order going. And it seems to be wanting to do its own thing. Apparently, the United States cannot do its own thing. The United States has to essentially do whatever Europe wants it to do. If it's not, then it's isolationist, or the new buzzword, as we'll see, is they're engaged in global destruction. And that's it. So that the this the this
Well, you can make the argument, George, that they're more dependent on the United States than ever before, and there's no independence on the horizon. They have
no
made their bed, and now they must sleep in
that
it.
exactly. So prior to the start of this conference, they issued a document. And the document, this is a long document, and it's the you can see the title, Under Destruction. So then you say, okay, well, what's under destruction? Well, the destruction is the rules-based order. And of
Okay,
course,
so what do we see the NATO star. What else do we see here?
well, yes, it's an, I mean, that's an elephant, right? So now you have to wonder why, which I don't quite understand, why is it an elephant?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I guess there are bits and pieces of the elephant are missing. And I
So
guess that's
it's a ravaged elephant.
it's a ravaged elephant. Um, I don't know how it got to be so ravaged, but but
I would
none.
have thought that like Africa would use the elephant. How many elephants are in Europe?
I don't think so. I mean, the only reason why I thought it might be an elephant is because Trump, Republican Party, and their
Yeah.
symbol is the elephant. But I don't. But what's that got to do with Europe? But as we'll see, um, one aspect of this conference is the attendance of the Democrats. There's a heavy Democrat contingency, not con a contingent, it at Munich,
Well, why
and
can't just Democrats be part of it? Why do the United States have to be part of NATO? Can the Democrats just be part of the NATO?
well, I think that's a very good idea. I mean, and but if you look at it, I mean, the Europeans who always proclaim how they love America, we really love America. Well, you only love the Democrats. I mean, you only want like one political faction in America. Because the Democrats, they're and the message the Democrats are coming with, because Gavin Newsom will be in attendance. Gretchen Whitmer will be in attendance, and
American governors.
that's right. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
Oh, good old.
AOC herself, will be in attendance, and she will be speaking.
What?
Uh, yes, she will talk about the working class perspective on foreign policy. So
She's not from the working class, everyone. She's a project, okay?
exactly. But she was always clever, oh, I'm from the Bronx. She's, of course, not from the Bronx. She's from upstate New York, but upstate New York is actually very close to the Bronx. So it's very easy to say, oh, yeah, yeah, I'm from the Bronx. No, upstate New York, that's where you grow up. But anyway, there is the report under destruction. And this is the intro by Wolfgang Ischinger, who was at some point a NATO Secretary General. I mean, these are ubiquitous figures that they hold these positions, and you kind of eminently forgotten. And here he is. He talks about, well, this extraordinary attention Munich is attracting this year is not only a reflection of the many conflicts and crises that dominate this global agenda. It is the result of a changing role of the United States in the international system. For generations, U.S. allies were not just able to rely on American power, but on a broadly shared understanding of the principles underpinning the international order. They always use this kind of language, broadly shared understanding of the principles underpinning the international order. When were these broadly shared principles? I don't really remember that. Other than the Europeans were happy to go along with anything the Americans did, as long as they got to do whatever they wanted to do, and basically contribute as little as possible to their security, and got a nice freebie in their economic relations with the
Yeah,
United States.
but that's a kind of a everything is allowed except for what is forbidden. And so there were certain areas the United States, oh, we're going to have our own defense, the European defense. No, you're not.
No,
Nope.
that's right.
No, you're
That's right.
not. Okay.
But
I don't really think you guys need to be developing your own
good.
anti-ballistic missile systems. We can do that. Okay. No, no, no. So everything's allowed except for what's forbidden. Okay.
Right.
What these principles are, I have no
No,
idea what.
no, that's right. You think, well, what are these? But that's when they talk about these, like the rules-based order, it's very important not to specify what exactly they are. So, you think, okay, well, was the Iraq invasion in accordance with the rules-based order? Was the bombing of Yugoslavia in accordance with the rules-based order? You went along with it. You were perfectly happy with it. You didn't raise any serious objections. But it's a nice idea that, well, before there was this glorious time when everyone, God was in his place, everyone knew where they stood in the system, and everything was happy. The flowers were blooming, and there were no problems. I mean,
Yeah, and Denmark had Greenland.
that's right. That's right. Um, and then these tensions were already visible at last year's Munich Security Conference. The speech delivered by Vice President Vance, which attracted considerable attention well beyond Munich, illustrated just how different the current administration's perspective on key issues is from the bipartisan liberal internationalist consensus that has long guided U.S. grand strategy.
Yeah, but see, the author of this doesn't understand like the term, the bipartisan liberal internationalist that those are dirty words now.
well,
They are.
well, that's right.
Outside of that bubble, yeah. But those are words of scorn.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly. Um, and but they are words of scorn precisely because they haven't delivered very much
People.
for most people. And above all, they haven't actually delivered security. Under this rubric of liberal internationalist consensus, well, you haven't delivered any. What security have you delivered?
Actually, what came into being um, uh, as a result of the Cold War, but then the unipolar moment, that so-called consensus didn't adjust, and that was one of the reasons why we have the problems we have now. Because when it comes to security, well, nobody has security now. Why is that? It's because of institutions like NATO.
Right. That's right. That's right. Um, and then so here we have these are the bullet points. So one, the world has entered a period of wrecking ball politics. In many Western societies, leaders who favored destruction over incremental change have risen to prominence.
What destruction? What is he talking about? This is hyperbole.
It's hyperbole, but this is where what's interesting about that is that they call it destruction. Then hey, we just got to continue as everything
Yeah,
that we're doing because we're
because it
doing
was
such
working out so well.
exactly because we're doing such a fantastic job. Um, And then it says their disruptive agendas build on widespread disenchantment with the performance of democratic institutions and a pervasive loss of trust in meaningful reforms. This is the kind of meaningless blather, that we can go back to any time at all in the past, 1916, 1915. It's always this widespread disenchantment. When hasn't there been a widespread disenchantment with the performance of democratic institutions? But they want to present this as somehow it's already started with Trump, and that somehow we need to deal with the problem of Trump. Of course, their view is we have to wait Trump out. That's really there. What is the agenda behind all this big talk? Is we need to wait Trump out, and then everything will get back to normal. Once we can get these, a Gavin Newsom in there or Gretchen Whitmer, everything is going to be fine. Ironically, the President of the United States, the country that did more than any other to shape the post-1945 international order, is now the most prominent of the demolition men. As a result, more than 80 years after the construction began, the post-war international order is now under destruction.
Yeah, but
Now,
they were the part of the architects of it.
yes. Also, this is the hyperbole. It's now under destruction. What has been destroyed? Trump has got you to pay more towards NATO. So in other words, NATO is going to be strengthened. I mean, if you're really going to cough up more money, NATO is going to be strengthened. That's how is he destroying anything? And he even when it comes to Ukraine, and that's the one that they're complaining about that somehow America's walking away from Ukraine. America hasn't walked away from Ukraine. He's just making the Europeans pay for the weapon system. Well, if you want to keep this war going, then pay for these weapons. But America's not standing in the way of keeping this war going.
Yes, and also why Kaya Kalas complaining, why doesn't Europe needs a seat at the table? Well, no. 80 years you've ceded your sovereignty, your
Right,
sovereign control of your security to the United States. Why do you need a seat at the table?
right,
You
right,
didn't earn it. No,
right,
things have come to their logical
right,
conclusion.
right.
It's worked out very, very well.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Because not only were they able to get away with paying nothing for their security, they actually had a very nice trading arrangement with the United States. They, always ran a nice trade surplus. So, American manufacturing industry was denuded. And yeah, of course, they wanted this whole setup to continue. And are not happy when anyone says, hey, you got to pay up a little bit more. I mean, every American president has said you have to pay more. But no one actually did anything very much about it. I mean, it was just, yeah, definitely. We will set up a committee to look into how we can pay more for our upkeep. They didn't do much about it. And then it says here, for its supporters, Washington's bulldozer politics promises to break institutional inertia and compel problem solving on challenges that were previously marked by gridlock. Critics, in turn, fear that this destructive policy is undermining the international community's ability to tackle humankind's most daunting challenge. Notice the humankind. Yeah, the moment you read that, humankind, that's a weird word. But you
Well,
can't say
yeah,
mankind. You can't say mankind.
we're we're on point three, and demolition metaphor is already a bit stale,
It's
George.
already, but humankind's most daunting challenges. I just love that. Yeah, tell us what these most daunting challenges are. I mean, that is the most vacuous. The
I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of dull today, but and compel problem solving on challenges that were previously marked as gridlock. I don't
I
understand
know
what that.
I have difficulties understanding that. They
I mean,
also
how can you have problem solving and gridlock in the same
solving on
sentence?
challenges that were previously mine, but um, I don't, they were previous but gridlock. But the way they're presented is like, well, that sounds pretty good. I mean, if you're gonna, if you had gridlock before and now you don't have gridlock, well, that's
Yeah,
a good
well,
thing.
yeah. There's not any gridlock now. That's a good point.
Yeah, yeah, good. We got the gridlock out of the way. And anyway, this is the big talk, and then those who are still invested in a rules-based order are increasingly organizing themselves. But if they want to contain the worst expressions of the policy of destruction, they need to better fortify essential structures, draw up new, more substantial, sustainable designs, and become bolder builders themselves. God, I'm thinking about the mentality of someone who kind of writes these empty.
Yeah, I mean, so are you talking about a New Year's resolution or something?
It sounds like it, yeah. And here they're talking about the main concern. This is the main concern, which is this
What is
Russia.
a detachment issue?
Well, I think they mean, that people are detaching themselves from Europe.
Okay, okay.
It's like
What? So it's like
you're detaching. It's
so
like
it's the causes of detachment.
yeah, that's right. It's like
Why
detachment.
can't they just write that? It's simple.
Well, it's like, somebody's detaching himself or herself from you. So it's not very nice. I think they feel that America's detaching
Oh,
itself. Yeah.
okay, okay.
And then, so how is Russia's ongoing military and hybrid aggression shaping Europe's security landscape? What impact does the uncertainty created by the policies of the second Trump administration have on the continent's security? And how is Europe coping with these developments, politically, financially, and industrially? Um,
Well, how is Europe cope? Well, you can use coping here in a different way. You don't want to talk to the Russians. It's not Russia's fault. So I mean,
but,
cope.
but,
Just cope.
but
Just
that's
cope.
and that brings up a very interesting question. You're creating this huge event, this Munich Security Conference, but you don't invite the Russians. How are you going to talk about the security of Europe if you don't invite the Russians? You don't have to like them, you don't have to approve of them, you don't have to agree with
They
them,
can
but at
stay
least
across town. They can stay across
exactly.
town.
But
Okay.
you want at least to invite them and hear what they have to say. I mean, I don't know how you can discuss security. You can have a security conference without getting input from your main adversary. So that and of course that they're very proud of that, which means that this conference becomes yet another one of those talking. Let's just talk among ourselves.
No, I don't want to use your term because I learned it from you and I love it. Yeah, supper club. I like that.
Exactly, it's a supper club, and it's Munich. Food is pretty good there, so I imagine the supper club will be quite nice. But even the most exclusive supper clubs, you have to get a special invitation. So it's not everybody, gets to the supper club. And you remember, I think it was last year or the year before, Stephen Walt said, "Oh, I got invited to this really exclusive dinner. I can't tell you much about it, but there were really, really important people at the dinner table, and I heard lots and lots of really important things." So, sometimes,
That was probably the Epstein table. Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, but you imagine you're so flattered that you got to the really important table with the really important people, and
But
you heard
yeah, but
important things discussed at the
you
important table.
Stephen writes good stuff. I read
I
it.
I I I I I'd say it's touch so. I mean, it's like,
Yeah. Okay, okay. I'm not going to die on that hill. But see, what I would say to him, and I would say this in good faith and with respect, but this is why you people at are dead end. You just want to hear things that you want to hear, and people want to invite you because you'll just recycle and regurgitate what everybody else has said. See, this is why it's a dead end. Why don't have a delegation of like Russian scholars, okay, Lukianov, for example, let him sit there at the supper club and say, well, we have a different point of view here. You're never going to hear a different point of view. How can you make policy?
That's right. And that's really the problem, because you have, these endless meetings. Just, think about you had the NATO defense ministers meeting, I think it was 2 days ago. Then we had what's the big thing? The one they have in Switzerland, Gstaad. That was we always talk about the one where Mark Carney delivered
Oh,
that
Davos, Davos,
Davos,
Davos.
exactly, the Davos thing. And so you're having constantly meeting, but it's the same people, essentially, and it becomes these intramural
Yeah.
disagreements. So
It's
okay,
kind
so
of
you've got
it's
AOC,
yeah, okay.
and just saying, oh, we love the Europeans, just forget about Trump, focus on us, we're with you. And that's but there's no real serious discussion of the actual security issues. It just becomes,
Well,
a matter of personalities. Hey, we're good guys, not and Trump isn't.
George has told me in the past that he knows how to make a Hungarian goulash. I'd like to taste it one day. But why do I mention this? Well, that's like George creating, preparing a huge, huge pot of goulash, and then he puts it in the refrigerator, and then he gets a ladle and pours it out and says, "This is a meal." And
Right.
then you put it back in the refrigerator or you put it in the microwave. This is another meal. No, it's the same thing.
It's the same meal,
Okay?
exactly.
The
Yeah,
same meal.
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly. And so when you look at this report,
Oh God.
no, no, yes, I know it looks horrible, but what's interesting is precisely the lack of anything new and interesting that's
Well,
said
I
here.
mean,
This is at the level of newspaper editorials. I mean, you're not adding anything to, human knowledge.
if there are security problems, security dilemmas, I would very much welcome point one, what went wrong?
Right,
Point two, what was our involvement
right,
in this?
right,
Point three, what could we have done differently?
right.
See, that would be stimulating here. This is just moaning
That's right.
and brooding.
Yes, that's right. And really, when you read this is long and tedious, you think, well, it's like reading a long Washington Post editorial. There's nothing new in this. This is a Munich Security Conference. You think, well, you're the real specialists. You're the people who know about these things, who spend all day and you get paid big, big bucks to think about security. And you've got nothing more to say than the familiar complaints about Russia and the familiar complaints about Trump. And the gravamen of the complaints about Trump is that, oh, he's not playing our game. Why isn't he playing our game? Why isn't he doing what we want him to do? So, see, this is the opening sentence. Russia's ongoing aggression constitutes, quote, the most significant and direct threat to NATO members and European security. Right away, that opening sentence, it's crying out for debate, at the very least, a debate. It's the most significant direct threat to NATO members. Why is it a threat to NATO members? But
I mean, it's not even a
taken
debate.
axiomatic because that's what editorial writers always take as axiomatic.
Well, Russia's ongoing aggression constitutes, quote, the most significant and direct threat, end quote, to NATO members and and European security. Okay, well, that is your consensus. So the Overton window is like this.
Right,
I mean, George and I could debate for hours that
right,
one sentence, that
right,
one sentence.
right. Exactly, exactly.
But no, but that's already a given.
Right.
Okay. So the framework in which you can
Right.
talk about this has already been determined. You can't go outside of it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And this is the document that's introducing, well, setting the agenda for the conference. Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, even the ubiquitous kind of Putin. I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't he have a title? I mean, just he just becomes Putin. Putin's full-scale, and you don't even say Russia. It's just Putin. He personally has this invasion, has shattered Europe's cooperative security architecture and violated the norm of territorial integrity in
No,
the.
they know Europe destroyed the cooperative nature of the security arrangement. That's why
That's
we're in
right.
here.
That's right. And then the territorial integrity. I mean, you know, we don't have to go into details. Just say Yugoslavia. I mean
Yeah.
that's great. You want the territorial integrity. You
Well,
were
and everyone, I remember very clearly, and because Lavrov has been foreign minister for so long, when the Kosovo event happened, he said, "You will regret that." I'm paraphrasing, of course. You will regret it. And then when Crimea came around, we said, "Well, we told you."
right. That's right. And one has to say we don't have to get into details now. Russia's claim on Crimea rather stronger than the claim that Kosovo should be independent. There was never any legal basis for that one. So
Well,
but Russia's claim is much stronger, and Russia
Russia's
went through much more a much more rigorous process than the Kosovo ever did.
Yeah, well, Crimea was part of Russia before the United States was even a country.
Exactly. Um, anyway, in the most threatening and vivid way since the end of World War II, now entering its fifth year, the war has reached new heights of brutality and violence, with Russia regaining tactical initiative along parts of the front, despite staggering battlefield losses, crippling sanctions, intensifying Ukrainian strikes on Russian infrastructure, and mounting international pressure to negotiate. The Kremlin has shown no signs of backing down from its maximalist aims. Well, you could say that, but you could also say, hey, if you wanted to negotiate an end to this, you could always have done it. I mean, it was you who never wanted to negotiate. You're only pretending now to negotiate because of Trump. Trump came along and said, "Oh no, we need to end this." So now you have to say, "Yeah, we need to end it." But you had all those years when you were
Yeah.
absolutely categorically refusing to negotiate.
Again, the Europeans are piggybacking off of the United States. Trump went to Anchorage. Putin went to Anchorage. Interestingly, after that, the Europeans are all talking about negotiate, because Trump opened that door. So you could
Yes,
talk about, well, we need to negotiate. Okay.
right.
So not one of them has the intellectual fortitude or the moral fortitude to actually pick up the phone.
That's right. As Macron said, one of these days I might call Putin. Oh, fantastic. Just, hey, you've got the phone, pick up the phone and you can call him. But one of these days I might do that. Anyway, it says meanwhile, Moscow's propaganda machine continues to frame. This is what I mean. It's like cliche after cliche after cliche. Meanwhile, propaganda machine continues to frame the war as a civilizational struggle between Russia and the West, seeking to rally support at home and abroad. Its persistent
No,
new.
it's the West that is framed it as a civilizational struggle.
Yes.
Russia doesn't frame it that way.
No. And it's very interesting because, of course, the civilizational struggle, who brought that subject up? Well, that was the time of Maidan.
Maidan.
Carl Bildt, one of these awful kind of NATO types who've been around forever, he was the one who went to Maidan and said, this is a civilizational issue. Ukraine has to make a decision. And Carl Bildt, this was particularly poisonous because anyone who knew anything about Ukraine knew this is a very divided country. So if you make a decision to go for west and not east, you're going to split this country apart. It was fairly
And
obvious, and yet Bildt went ahead and did this.
again, and you can go back to the WikiLeaks. This is exactly what Lavrov and other members of the foreign policy elite in Russia said. You will destroy Ukraine.
Right,
Okay. And I way before this, I said repeatedly, Ukraine isn't going east. It isn't going west.
right,
It's going to stay right where it is.
right,
Okay.
right.
And Victoria Nuland and others, they flipped the script, and that's why we have what we have.
Yeah, that's right. Um, and then its persistent nuclear saber rattling is only the most brazen reminder that the military threat extends well beyond Ukraine. Indeed, some intelligence agencies estimate that Russia could reconstitute its forces for a regional war in the Baltic Sea area within 2 years of a potential ceasefire in Ukraine, and for a local one against a single neighbor within 6 months. Well, if that's the case, then NATO is pretty useless. I thought the whole point of NATO was that you were providing these fantastic security guarantees, which would mean that everyone was safe. So now you're admitting that this whole project has been a failure. I mean, if Russia is really planning to attack NATO member states, and there's not much you can do about it, well, then what's the point of this?
I always find it very distressing, George, the within 2 years, within 6 months.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what are you doing about stopping it?
Hmm.
What are you doing? Maybe
Exactly.
you ought to pick up the phone
That's
and
right.
just say, "Hey, we see a collision going on here. Do you see the same? Maybe we should talk."
But of course, but the fact that they don't do that is reflects they want this. This is what the point. They want this confrontation. And the way they get this
Because they
confrontation,
want the United States to come in. That's it.
exactly. And that's it. That's what they want. They know perfectly well. They're not going to fight, the Baltic states, Poland, they're not going to Italy, and then none of them is going to do any fighting. They expect the United States to come in and do the fighting for them. So but they do whip up this constant hysteria. Russia's a threat. We need to do something about it. And of course, when you do that, when you whip up hysteria about the adversary, they have these aggressive intentions against us. Well, then it essentially means you have the aggressive intentions against them, and then you're planning for a war against them. It's a fairly obvious, but they're always lying about it. It's the same with the issue of the security guarantees. If you issue your unilateral security guarantees to one side of a conflict and not to the other side, then essentially that's a warlike act. It's also fairly obvious. I mean, everyone's known in the past when you do security guarantees, you guarantee both sides. We guarantee this. Whoever breaks the ceasefire, we guarantee that we'll be on the other side. But if you just say, "Oh, only guarantees to Ukraine," well, how is Russia going to interpret that other than, "Hey, you're now mobilizing Ukraine against us"? And everyone's always understood it that way. I mean, there's no mystery here. Anyway, there's the first signs of this widening battlefield is already visible. Moscow has further intensified its hybrid warfare campaign across Europe, reflected in a growing number of suspected Russian incidents, which we've talked about frequently,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
Russian incidents.
after all of, I mean, George and I endless number of times talked about it, and they're still suspected. I mean, what kind of
They're still suspected.
counterintelligence do you have? What kind of investigations do you have? I mean, none of them, not one,
Right.
not one.
Including yeah, and of course, like the Keir Starmer and the Rent Boys. There's apparently a Russian connection that no one's ever quite spelled out. What's the Russian connection to those models, the Ukrainian models who blew up Keir Starmer's old car? He didn't even own the car, but they blew up this car. So I don't know. But Russia's somehow involved in that. The fall of 2025 saw a sharp rise in airspace violations and unauthorized drone overflights. In September alone, 20 Russian drones intruded into Polish airspace. I think that was always very dubious whether those were 20 Russian drones. And while three Russian MiG-31 fighters violated Estonian airspace for 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
This means war, prompting both governments to invoke NATO consultations under Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Russia is increasingly blending cyber and kinetic attacks in its suspected surveillance, sabotage operations, and attacks on energy grids,
Well, I
blurring.
mean, I mean, why have this security conference at all? Looks like you made up your mind.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. None of this, setting the agenda, would have the appropriate thing is like, how do we resolve the security crisis that something that has emerged in recent years in Europe. How do we try to figure out how we can resolve this issue? None of that. You're just simply whipping up hysteria by repeating, the worst kind of editorializing that you get in mainstream media.
It's just a megaphone. This is all this is.
That's right. That's right. Blurring the boundaries of war and peace. Many of these incidents are designed to remain deniable or ambiguous. I don't understand. What's the point of if you do something like that and it's ambiguous, then what are you gaining? I mean, I think if you're going to terrorize anyone, then you want to show, yeah, I did it, and next time I could do something even worse. But if it's deniable and ambiguous, then I don't quite know what you gain.
What was the purpose of doing it?
Yes, exactly. Enabling Russia to evade direct attribution while exerting psychological pressure and inducing political paralysis. Analysts widely view these operations as deliberate efforts by Moscow to probe Europe's defenses, sow division, intimidate politics, and weaken support for Ukraine by diverting attention towards domestic security. And Europe now faces the challenge of proactively deterring further provocations while avoiding inadvertent escalation. All right. So again, weaken support for Ukraine. And so apparently continuing to strengthen support for Ukraine somehow adds to security. That's adding to European security. So that's the highlights of that fantastic document. Now, going into this conference, we had Macron doing his familiar routine of wringing his hands about everything, and particularly wringing his hands about Trump, the threat to Europe and Trump. But anyway, our good friend Schmerz, Chancellor Schmerz, kicked off the conference, not with anything terribly interesting, but he naturally lashed out, and why wouldn't you lash out against Viktor Orban? You think, well, that's apparently the threat to European security.
Yeah, that's like kicking the dog, Yeah.
Exactly. Now, as gagglers know, there's an election in Hungary in 2 months' time, and it's obviously going to be a tight race. The Europeans are very anxious to see Orban lose, and so far they've gone out of their way not to overtly interfere in Hungary, because then they're afraid Orban's going to use their interference in his campaign. So they've tried to be, very surreptitious about their interference. But here, Merz just couldn't help himself. In the Q&A, Merz gets asked about Russia. He starts with a swipe on Hungary's Viktor Orban, telling the story of a prime minister from the EU who traveled to Moscow with no mandate. So it's bringing up that issue when he was Hungary was.
Well, he went there as Prime Minister of Hungary.
He went there as Prime Minister. He said up front that he's not representing the EU. He doesn't need a mandate. He
has a mandate from the people that elected him.
That's right. He was acting as, at least he was attempting to act as a mediator. So he went everywhere. He went to Moscow, he went to Kiev, he went to Beijing, and he went to see Trump. So Trump was down in Mar-a-Lago. So he says, oh, he went to Moscow, but that's among the other places that he went, seeing trying to mediate, trying to bring this thing to an end. With no mandate, achieved nothing, and a week later, Ukraine suffered some of the heaviest attacks on its civil infrastructure. So it's all Orban's fault.
Yeah, so ergo it's
Orban. Yeah, yes. Which itself is very interesting, because he's essentially been the one European leader who has been denouncing this war. He says this war has to end. So if it makes a sense to talk, we are willing to talk. But as you can see with the American side, Russia is not yet willing to talk seriously. Then, of course, that raises the question, what do you mean by willing to
Yeah,
talk
well,
seriously? You mean capitulation? Yeah, that's exactly what he means. And then he says the war will only end when Russia is at least economically and potentially militarily exhausted. We are approaching this time, but we are not yet there. Russia has to give up this terrible war against Ukraine, and we have to do everything that is needed to bring them to the point where they see no further advantages for them to continue this terrible war. Now, when you read all this, this is first of all, this is a strategy that NATO has been pursuing right from the beginning. But the question arises, well, what's going to happen to Ukraine in the meantime? The Ukrainian people that you ostensibly care so much about, you want to continue this war. You know, Russia has to give up this war. Only when Russia is economically and militarily exhausted will the war end. So we'll just continue with this and say, well, we've got to do it. Therefore, we have to do everything to continue with this war.
yeah,
How
that's a
many
big go.
people are you planning on
Yeah,
getting killed during this time?
that's cold comfort for Ukraine, huh? Jeez. I mean,
Imagine that.
gee.
So you're talking about this. This is the Munich Security Conference, and your plan is, well, let's just keep the war going and let's see how many more people can get killed because down the road, Russia will cave. That's quite a gamble
That's a real
on
that's a
Russia caving.
that's a crapshoot.
Yeah, I would have thought they're not cavers. Russians don't
Well,
really
see, but
cave.
this is not this. This is um, a desire. This
Yeah.
is a hope.
Yeah.
This is not a strategy.
No, that's it. But that's more or less what NATO has been about all this time. Let's just say, well, let's just keep it going, and we have to do everything what is needed to bring them to the point. So everything just as before, only more so.
Well, we'll see how has it worked out so far.
Yeah. And then here's a Guardian comment. Merz's comments on Hungary. First is swipe and Orban's visit to Moscow, and then on enlargement will no doubt spark an angry reaction from Budapest. Particularly, the latter comment is very telling, a clear reference to the parliamentary election in April, as that's probably as close as he can get to endorsing the Hungarian opposition. And then expect a strong response from Orban, who will no doubt decry this as foreign interference in the Hungarian elections. Well, I wonder why he was going to
Which
say
would
that.
be, yeah.
Um, by the way, these comments too have a U.S. angle. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be flying to Hungary from Munich, which is true. Rubio will be in Hungary. He's also visiting Slovakia, which itself is kind of an interesting
Yeah.
itinerary. He's not going to London. He's not going to Paris. He's going to Hungary and Slovakia. Merz has made it quite clear he would not want the US to support or endorse Orban, as he thinks his actions run against Europe's interest. That's, Merz's view.
Well,
They,
it's very interesting. The Europeans are taking the higher ground right now. They've never had a problem in weighing in on another country's elections, except for now, which I'm sure they are.
well, of course
Okay.
they are, but they are absolutely petrified about doing anything that's going to strengthen Orban. So they think if we go in and tell Hungarians what we really think, then they're going to vote for Orban. It's like they've suddenly tamped down all the talk about LGBTQ stuff and anything at all that sounds liberal or somehow in accordance with EU values, anything. They're just keeping a low profile because I think it's only going to strengthen Orban. So that's why I said, oh no, we're not the fit. Anyway, so prior to the conference, we had Macron, who gave an interview to the Financial Times, And the headline here, which is EU-US tensions over Greenland and tech are far from over, says Emmanuel Macron. And then he says, well, I'm always respectful and predictable when dealing with President Donald Trump, but not weak.
Why do you mention that then?
But he goes on, when there's a clear act of aggression, I think what we should do isn't bow down or try to reach a settlement. I think we've tried that strategy for months. It's not working. And then he
What?
says,
I think we should
try to. I think he's talking about. I think he's talking about Greenland somehow.
Greenland. Okay,
We
all
go
right. Okay.
Greenland. That's it. This is the hill they plan to die on. Greenland. Um, Europe was now dealing with a Trump administration that was, quote, openly anti-European, shows contempt for the EU, and wishes its dismemberment. Well, them's quite strong words from Macron. Um, and he's openly anti-European. Well, I don't know. They've never said that. But maybe you can say that's implicit
Yeah, I
in
could. Yeah,
in
yeah. I
in,
mean, you
in
could.
Trump's policy, but
Yeah.
they've never pursued any agenda of breaking the EU up.
I don't think that any American administration, because it's easier to have them all cowed in the same club. Okay.
Yeah, I
I mean,
exactly.
just why do you need a Hungarian desk and a Slovakian
Yeah,
desk and a French desk? It just, keep the Europeans corralled.
you're right, right,
Okay. Pick your champions, the Poles and the Baltics. Okay.
right,
I
right.
mean, I maybe as a result of the policy, there could be dismemberment, but I don't think that's the
I
design.
don't think so because I think as you say it would only complicate life for the United States because then they would have to be dealing with all sorts of states and they would would just make everything much more difficult to get a common pro-US Western policy. So it's much easier for them just to deal with an entity. They have NATO, and then the EU and so on. And then they'll bring in Ursula von der Leyen. She'll they'll read the riot act to her or otherwise, and that's it. It's always been, and the Americans were always in favor of the EU. They always promoted the EU
It's an
because it
American
just made everything
project.
much easier.
It's an American
It's
project.
an American
At least
project, exactly.
originally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I thought this was great. Um, but this is part of this European neurosis, like somehow the Americans are so mean to us. They're not thinking about, oh, they wish us harm. They're openly anti-EU, openly anti-European. They want to dismember us.
The
Uh,
fact of the matter is that Europe isn't that important to worry
no,
about.
I don't think so. Exactly. It's not. It's not. Yeah, that's right. And then he says, Macron said the recent crisis over Greenland, when Trump threatened punitive tariffs against European countries opposed to his effort to secure control of the vast Arctic island from Denmark, was not over. He also predicted that the EU and the Trump administration would clash later this year over tech regulation, an area where the EU has long irritated the US for applying stricter rules on data privacy, hate speech, and digital
Well,
taxation.
no lies detected
Well,
there.
that's right. But yeah, hate speech, because we don't know what hate speech is. And so when you use that ubiquitous term, almost everything can fall under its rubric, and therefore it becomes essentially a mandate for censorship. And that's what J.D. Vance said last time. And they didn't like it. Europeans got very upset because he said something that's true. Yeah, you basically censorship has now become the norm in Europe.
Yeah, because censorship is hating speech.
Exactly. The US will, in the coming month, that's certain, attack us over digital regulation. But the digital regulation has hit American companies. The social media companies are all run by the United States. And the Europeans have been hitting them. I mean, they're hitting them with massive fines and threatening to increase these fines. 6% of global revenue. That's a serious fine. So they hit
Well,
X.
I mean, this is obviously not my wheelhouse, but I have to think at some point, George, these large platforms, tech platforms, are going to say, is it worth staying in Europe?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's, that's a tough one. That's a tough nut to crack because Europeans are social media literate.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean that's I actually said something nice about the Europeans. Don't hold it against me. Um, but I mean, if I was, you think about where the markets are, where the
Right.
growth is.
Right.
I mean, is it just because essentially, and we've talked about it before, it's the political class of the EU that wants to control American companies, and well, make your own, okay?
Right.
Stop whining about it, okay?
Thank you.
I just have to wonder at what point is these platforms saying, is it worth staying here? I mean, because this is never going to end.
No, I think X under Musk is likely to make that decision that it's not worth time. I think Telegram. There'll be a real question whether Telegram is going to want to stay. Facebook has generally been very compliant with the Europeans, and of course Google has been compliant, and therefore YouTube has been quite compliant. But I think X, Musk has no interest in playing the Europeans game. And
And we get one of these situations where Musk will say, "Well, I'm making money in so many other things," and I mean, if I could ask Musk one question, I'd say, if you could do it all over again, would you
right,
buy Twitter? Because this is, I mean, when I look at his vast wealth, I mean, even Twitter is just kind of a nuisance for him.
right. But I think he likes it. I mean, I think that
Oh, yeah, of course he likes it, and
because
he must. I think he has shareholders as well.
right, but I
So,
think it enables him to be a part of the debate. I mean, he
yep.
was in the administration. He's not in the administration now, but he maintains his position in the debate because of X. Um, but if they're going to keep hitting him with fines, then really he would ask, well, why do we need to stay in Europe? I mean, we're going to start losing money if they're going to keep hitting us with these massive fines. Um, and um, and the point of it is that, and this was in that report by the House committee, is through your control over the social media, you're interfering in American politics, and that's it's not just hate speech. You are interfering in American politics by controlling what's allowed to be said on these platforms. Um, and says the U.S. will, in the coming months, attack us over digital regulations, and adding the Trump administration could hit the EU with tariffs if the bloc used its landmark Digital Services Act to control U.S. tech companies. Yeah, I mean, and why not? I mean, it's like,
And why not?
you're going to
Look,
do that.
look,
Yeah,
you have to look at the lay of the land here. This will come out as a criticism, but I think at this point in our conversation, it's an observation. Trump has surrounded himself by these tech lords,
yeah,
and what they want, they will get.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so if someone like Musk will say, they're screwing around with me too much, and Trump will say, well, how can I help?
Right,
Well, put 30% tariffs on all their cars or
right.
50%.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah. That's right. And then there's the Guardian on this reports about the Democrats, the Democrat contingent visiting Munich.
Well,
Some
George, just being because of my age and stuff like this, and someone that has always been interested in politics at a very young age, when I read a title like that, I just think, and I don't usually talk this way, but this is very un-American to do
It is
this.
un-American. I mean, when you go somewhere and you urge them, somebody else to attack the incumbent administration, the incumbent government, that it's kind of unpatriotic. Because after all, you are representing the United States, and you're saying, hey, why don't you take sides in our political debate? But absolutely, the Democrats do this, and then they got Zelensky. Remember, Zelensky, came to the U.S. and openly interfered in that election. The Democrats did that. They
Yeah,
maneuvered him into essentially campaigning for Kamala Harris.
yeah, but see, this is the what's percolating up on from so many different fronts is that George, doesn't it appear to you that it's again the elites get
Oh
to
yeah, yeah.
decide?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And this is really irritating, okay?
Right,
And it's outrageous sometimes. Is that no? I mean, you do not like Donald Trump. There's a lot of Americans don't like Donald Trump, but he was inaugurated the 47th president
right,
of the United States,
right,
okay? And
right.
that's where, and the president has wide powers when it comes to foreign policy. And George and I have been critical from the get-go. But that's how we decided the
Well,
things were going.
that's right, and that's but I think fundamentally it's always been and axiomatic in the United States that you don't go abroad and criticize the government of your country. They, basically, you have your disagreements, but you don't go abroad, and particularly you don't go abroad and urge governments abroad to oppose the government of your country. It's just not done. You can be critical, everyone can be critical, and so on, but that's just not. It's just not acceptable behavior. And then, of course, they say, "Oh, Trump is the one who's breaking the norms." No, the Democrats are breaking the norms. The Democrats are, they using other countries to interfere in the domestic elections.
If you, this is a bee in my bonnet, and it really boils my blood. And George and I have talked about it incessantly. No, it was Russiagate that upturned
Yeah,
norms.
right,
Okay,
right,
and I remember saying it to George over and over again here and
right,
other places, is that
right,
they will rue the day
right.
of what they're doing because you're upsetting standard norms and things need to always evolve. But it was, the FBI and the intelligence services going after a sitting president of the United States.
Yeah,
Talk
absolutely.
about norms.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Um, Anyway, here it says European leaders divided on how far to accommodate Trump's wrecking ball politics and foreign policy. And then US Democrats will use a security summit this weekend to urge European leaders to stand up to Donald Trump, with the continent divided over how to keep the unpredictable US president on side. So the Democrats will include some of Trump's most outspoken critics, such as Gavin Newsom, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, Ruben Gallego hasn't quite, not quite on the radar, but he's going to be there.
Yeah,
Always
the
very
first.
interesting that I mean, AOC, Ruben Gallego. I mean, none of these are particularly foreign policy Democrats. I mean, there are some
No,
Democrats who preoccupy themselves with foreign policy, but none of these have any foreign policy credentials.
no, none, none. And Sandy Cortez, I mean, she's just a brand, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But she's undoubtedly preparing a presidential run. I don't know if it's going to be 2028, but she will make a run.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Yeah, she's going to be the second coming of Obama.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, Newsom has already urged Europeans to realize that groveling to Trump's needs makes them look pathetic on the world stage. Yeah, he was at Davos. I think that's what he
Yeah,
said
he
at
was. Yeah,
Davos.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And telling reporters at Davos that he should have brought a bunch of knee pads. That is quite rude. Again, they say Trump breaks the norms. Hey, this didn't arouse any kind of
Yeah,
commentary.
but
When you talk like this.
I would say to the Europeans is that the place that you find yourself is of your own making. Gavin Newsom, interestingly enough, as governor of California, has far more power to fend off the federal government. He can go to court. He can do a lot of things. Okay, but the Europeans have no cards to play.
Right.
Gavin Newsom has more cards to play against Trump as governor of California than Europeans have facing Trump.
Yeah. Gallego was almost as forthright. Trump is destroying our world reputation or potentially our economic might around the world because he's being petty. None of this is rational. Everyone needs to stop pretending this is rational. But you
Okay,
see,
well
this is
that's real foreign policy
that's it.
outlined.
That's exactly it. So, but this is just an intramural political fight.
Yeah.
This is standard politics going on in the United States every day. You know, they come on
Yeah.
CNN or MSNBC and spew this. What's this got to do with this Munich Security Conference?
What
Why are you
is
bringing this
with
to
Gallego?
Munich?
What is his what he says here has nothing to do with security or
Nothing.
how to attain it.
Nothing. He
That,
just,
that's
yeah,
oh.
he just doesn't like Trump. Hey, I'm just going to go on and denounce Trump.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't like Trump.
That's
Okay,
right. Anyway, it says
Intramural, good word,
that's
George.
right. Some led, most prominently by French President Emmanuel Macron, have said that a new, more defiant diplomacy is essential to counter what the Munich organizers have called Trump wrecking ball policy. But as you said, you've done this defiant thing, but it's not getting you anything. I mean, what's that
Anyway,
going to get you?
no,
Uh,
it's actually negative returns, George.
that's right. I think as you said, when we were talking about when they put those, remember the visa bans on various Europeans, and then Macron complained about it, and I think you said, well, Macron had better be careful, otherwise Trump might impose a visa ban on Macron. Okay, Macron is now banned from entering the United States. Um, and then others, such as NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, have said maintaining Trump's goodwill is indispensable for European security. Mark Rutte said something else. He said that the idea that Europe will develop its own um, armed forces, its own defense system. He said this is absolute nonsense. If you think 5% of GDP will suffice to build up your own military, you know, you're living in cloud cuckoo and 10% minimum is what you're going to have to spend. It's going to cost trillions. Are you
Yeah.
seriously planning
You're
on
gonna have,
that? Yeah.
look, you're gonna have to go on a war footing. Yeah.
Exactly. So the Roger just, but just said this is
Well,
a
we have to remember Fruity there. He doesn't want to lose his job.
no.
Okay,
That's a, yeah. He has,
yeah,
of course,
because he
he has a
doesn't
vested
work.
interest in this.
He may claim some form of representation, but he is employed by the President of the United States.
That's right. Exactly right. So we're going to follow this security conference over the weekend because it only just got off the ground. So it's going to go on all the way through to Sunday. So it's going to be there's going to be a lot of beer consumed, and whatever bratwurst. But I don't know. These people want proper meals. They don't want to eat like the locals in Munich. So I imagine they will be very well fed, very well wined, and then they can feel very
Munich's a
very
nice
important.
town.
It's a beautiful,
Munich's a nice
beautiful,
town.
beautiful, beautiful city.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And I would imagine the conclusion of the conference will be a reiteration of everything at the introduction. So we did the introduction, and I think we already know the conclusion that the conference is going to come to.
Yeah, George. I have to take my dog's grooming. I need to do some extra groceries, and then when I'm all done with that, I'll check what they had to say. I mean, get me the footnotes because this is just a circle jerk. It really is. George is absolutely right. He said it at the very top. Without the Russians there, what's the point? You have your sleepovers all the time.
All the time. That's what's so amazing. It's like, if it was just this one meeting a
Yeah.
year, then you think, okay, but you just had, you have all your NATO meetings, you have your G7 meetings, your G20 meetings. Each one of these has a foreign ministers meetings, defense ministers meetings, and then of course you have the EU, all the various EU meetings, the council meetings, all the time. You see each other all the time. It's like, you're besties, you're inseparable. Every 2 days, you're in each other's company again. So,
And what have you accomplished? My father had a very strange hobby. He would because he had when he was worked for a company on a business account, and he would go to kind of nice restaurants, and he stole menus. He just had this huge menu collection. Okay. I never understood it, and I don't think I ever asked him about it. But could well imagine all these are catered parties, and that's how you're going to remember your time on the government dime. I remember that. Oh yeah, yeah, George and I gorged ourselves on this one. I remember I had this. Oh, this was a great soup,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how people
No,
remember things. Okay.
absolutely, yeah, yes. I can imagine, when sitting at these conferences, pretending to look interested, they're thinking about, I wonder if I should have a meat or a fish course this evening, and should I
You get
red
your
or a
assistant.
white this
You
evening?
point at your assistant. What kind of meat do they have? Is it going to be venison or is it beef? What?
Yeah, exactly. Venison
Like,
or beef.
get back to me real quick. Okay.
That's right.
Oh, the Russians, the Russians.
Exactly right. That's
For those of you that watch us, I mean, I love levity, okay? But how else are we supposed to explain this?
right.
I mean, it just these people are just so beyond reality.
That's right.
This is just a denial of reality. And at the end of the day, how to deal with Trump and all that. No, you don't have any cards to play. You played all of them, okay?
Yes.
So instead of complaining, bite your lip and say, how to move forward, okay? I
But
mean,
that's
you could be a happy vassal or a sad vassal. It's a choice.
But this is what really, and I think this is what's come out from our conversation today, which is that there's no change. You have
No,
no new ideas. You just
no
repeat
way.
the same thing. You've been saying the same thing for 4 years. I mean, there's nothing new here. Again, the complaining about the Russians this, the Russians that. Oh, we got to do, the Ukraine, and we're in danger. Oh, Trump isn't going along with this, but you don't have any ideas. Do you have a plan? Do you have a peace plan? Do you have a way of coming into Trump and finding some way in which you can come to an agreement
Well,
on Ukraine? Something.
okay,
But there's nothing. You
the
just go on
litmus
repeating
test
the same thing.
litmus test would be this. It's very simple and it's very easy. Okay, European members of NATO come up with an emissary, a person you can, all agree on, and then maybe go to ask for a meeting with Lavrov in Vienna or maybe Budapest or wherever, and start doing the hard work. They don't want to do any hard work.
Hmm. No, they
Oh,
they they, they don't.
oh my goodness, we want unity and all. No, I mean, you have to work hard to
No,
create
that's right.
consensus.
And so the point about this, what Merz, those highlights from Merz's speech. So essentially, well, let's see if we can get rid of Viktor Orban, because once we got Orban out, then there'll be no more opposition to our policy. In other words, we've got to continue our policy, and we're sick to death of having Orban always objecting to us. So no change on anything. We're doing such a fantastic job, even though we tell us everything's in crisis and everything's going to hell in the handbasket, but we're doing a fantastic job, and we've got to continue to do this fantastic job. So that's it. So you don't have that's why you don't have a place at the negotiating table, but you don't have any ideas at all on how to resolve any of your problems.
And
And
I'm sure you came across this Kaya Kalas. I mean, she just brings so much color in our lives. Um, uh, and any kind of ceasefire, end of cessation of the conflict in Ukraine must include a demilitarization
oh
of Russia.
yes,
This is
oh
like,
I
oh my
always love
God, oh my
yes,
God.
demilitarizing
Is she
exactly.
seriously drinking again? Okay.
That's right. That's it. Exactly. That's the plan. The demilitarization, and then of course, why the whole thing is so disgusting is, well, that means the war continues, and that means more, Ukraine, which you pretend to care so much about, more and more of it will just be destroyed. More and more Ukrainians are going to get killed for this fantasy that you have in mind that Russia will be demilitarized. Then, so towards that end, you're willing to sacrifice,
That's right.
any lives. Well, it's okay. You don't sacrifice anything. You're still going to get all your nice meals catered. Somebody else is going to be sacrificed.
This is something that we've both observed now for the entire time of the conflict, particularly since Istanbul. Everybody talks about when the conflict is over. George and I have given any scant thought to that because
Right.
why would you? How is it going to end?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What does it mean to
Yeah,
end?
yeah.
If you can't answer those questions, there's no reason, we need a reconstruction of Ukraine conference. That's already
Yes,
recycled toilet paper.
that's right. Another conference. Yes, that's right. The Reconstruction Conference. Yeah. So that so anyway, that's the intro to the Munich Security Conference. Very. I mean, it's funny that even when you mention it, when you say to people, "What do you know about the Munich Security Conference?" They'll always remember Putin's speech. I mean, it's gone down into folklore that Putin speech, which actually wasn't as tough or as aggressive as he's been made out to be in later years. I mean, he made some trenchant criticism, but he was by no means very hostile and so on. But the reaction to it was hysterical and deliberately
But
so.
I remember to this day, and this image in my mind is that Robert Gates, Secretary of Defense, and he migrated from what the
He was CIA.
yeah, and in the image is he was like doing this.
Yeah. That's right. But it was a speech. It was a there was nothing. I don't think it was anything special about it. He made what would you expect? A Russian leader. He makes
Well,
criticism of the West. John McCain. He was there, and he was the one who kind of created this idea. Well, Putin has declared war against us, and he sort of whipped up the hysteria. And of course, he was allowed to, but essentially, I don't think Putin ever really intended that he was going to cause any kind of a political
no,
earthquake. It was a deliberate act by John McCain.
yeah, well, go back and look at the
It
speech.
was I think it
Commenting
was
on
very
it,
mild.
it was a strident critique of how the West defines security,
Right,
and he
but
was proven prescient.
right, exactly. But it was far. It was. I mean, in retrospect, if you look at it now, it wasn't in any way
Oh, compared to
that
now, yeah.
that terrible. I mean, aggressive. Remember, 2007. This is in the aftermath of the Iraq War, so therefore, it was already quite acceptable in polite circles to criticize the United States and the Iraq War. So it wasn't like, well, this came out of the blue. No, this was on 4 years on from the start of the Iraq War, and the war had obviously gone south during those 4 years. So that's why I don't think Putin thought that he was saying anything so sensational. Moreover, at the time, he still said, "Hey, I remember when Gerhard Schroeder and President Jacques Chirac were on my side on Iraq." So that's why I don't think he thought this was going to cause any such a huge uproar. As I say, I think it was John McCain who kind of made this into this toxic issue. The speech is there. I mean, people can look at it and see for themselves whether it was that
Well, yeah, but
aggressive.
also, George, it's also, I think we could pinpoint that as a date of where Russia started pushing back and reminding the audience that they're part of the security arrangement of Europe too, just to remind you,
But yeah,
everyone. Okay, and I think that was.
yeah, it was around. But keep in mind, I mean, I think Russia was still reactive. I mean, if you think of 2008, they were still quite mild. I mean, the Bucharest summit was a year later, and it was who was doing the pushing? I mean, it was the Americans doing the pushing, and the Bush administration wanting to put Ukraine then and there on the path to NATO. I mean, he didn't quite succeed because Merkel wasn't willing to go along with that. But the Russians were reacting. I mean, he reacted then, and then it was Saakashvili who, having been given this promise, decided, hey, well, I'm going to kind of preempt everything by trying to solve Georgia's problems once and for all and make Georgia eligible for NATO membership.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, compared to what's being said today, and then you're
yeah, yeah.
absolutely right. Okay, but it should in retrospect, it was clearly a trajectory
Right.
for sure.
It was a trajectory, but at least at the time, they were inviting, they were still inviting Russians to take part, and they don't invite Russians to take part, which, as we said, makes very little sense. If you're going to talk about security of Europe, particularly, then I don't quite know how you can talk about it without,
You can't.
getting the Russians to take part.
You can't. You can't. Okay. So this is where we stand. This is Friday. George and I will obviously be talking about this on Sunday, maybe even into Monday during our live stream. Okay. So this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Everybody knows what word I'm thinking. I don't really want to say it because I don't want to wake up you know who. Okay.
That's
So um,
Exactly. That's really the point that they're trying to make is that, hey, we're not talking about wine bottles, we're not talking about bottles of scotch or bottles of vodka. We're talking about jars. And what do you do with jars? You kind of fill them with things. And in this case, you fill them with tips. And they say, what's so difficult about that? It's a plain English. That's their position. So if you have anything, any money that you're not using, any money that you're happy to part with, please into the tip jar. We don't want too many complaints coming from the
well, you
dogs.
don't want them imposing tariffs now.
Exactly. They're going to start cracking down. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and we're going to be able to maintain this dialogue, a friendly dialogue with the dogs. Otherwise, they might just break off the talks, and nobody wants that. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.